In the year 2000, Robert Downey Jr.'s life had hit rock bottom. 1 year into a 3-year prison sentence, the actor had gone from raking in $7 million annually to making 8 cents an hour scrubbing pizza pans. He had gone from being an Oscar nominee to inmate P50522 in a matter of years, and it looked like his career was well and truly over. Chris Evans, however, was a fresh-faced 18-year-old who had just arrived in LA with only one prior acting credit to his name, looking to make it big in the City of Angels. The two actors couldn't be further apart. One had it all and lost it, the other had nothing and everything to gain. But how did two actors with careers and lives so different become so intertwined that you can barely think about one without the other? How did their unconventional backstories make them perfect to play two of the biggest comic book characters of all time and dominate the box office? And how did it get to a point that, if it hadn't been for Downey Jr., an actor once seen as box office poison, Evans would never have taken the role of Captain America? To understand all of this, we need to go back to the beginning. Robert Downey Jr. was born in 1965 into an artistic household in Greenwich Village, New York. His father was an underground filmmaker and gave Downey Jr. his first acting role at the age of 5, and it quickly became clear that he was a natural performer. But Downey Jr.'s relationship with his father was unconventional, to say the least. At the age of 6, as a joke, his father offered him drugs for the first time, an event that would have negative consequences on him for the rest of his life. Later on, Downey Jr. dropped out of high school in California to pursue acting and returned to New York. He managed to score a number of acting jobs, landing a supporting role in the movie Weird Science, and despite only being 20, a role on SNL. Around this time, Downey Jr. met actress Sarah Jessica Parker, and the two quickly began dating, moving in together shortly after. Robert Downey Jr.'s career continued to climb, performing in movies such as The Pickup Artist and Less Than Zero. But it was in 1992 when his career really started to skyrocket after he beat out actors such as Robin Williams and Dustin Hoffman to land the role of Charlie Chaplin in Richard Attenborough's biopic. His performance as the classic star was a triumph, with his energy and charisma landing him an Oscar nomination. His hot streak continued as he appeared in a number of roles in films such as Heart and Souls and Natural Born Killers. But behind the scenes, everything wasn't as happy as it seemed. Robert Downey Jr. had become addicted to drugs, his relationship with Sarah Jessica Parker fell apart, and his behavior was starting to become erratic. This all came to a head in 1996. After he was pulled over in Malibu, police found a large quantity of drugs and a concealed firearm hidden in his car. He was arrested and put on probation, but while awaiting trial, things only got worse. In what is now known as the infamous Goldilocks incident, Downey entered a neighbor's house, stripped down to his underwear, folded his clothes on a chair, and passed out in a child's bed. The subsequent phone call to the police eventually went viral, with Downey's snoring being heard in the background. During this time, he was in and out of rehab and prison as he continued to struggle against addiction and depression.
It's easy to embrace hopelessness when things seem insurmountable.
His time in prison was a particularly traumatic experience for the actor. He was constantly threatened and beaten by his fellow inmates. He had to wade through garbage after the prison kitchen flooded and was forced to spit his toothpaste out in the toilet instead of the sink. However, almost a year after being sentenced, he was released early and within a week was back and acting again, with a role on the TV series Ally McBeal. It seemed like he had found some redemption, and despite not being a fan of his own performance, Downey won a Golden Globe for his work on the show, and his talent was once again showcased for the world to see. But his life and career continued to slide. Losing in his battle against his demons, Downey fell off the wagon once again and was fired from the show after he was caught with a number of illegal drugs. Now homeless and basically bankrupt, Downey's career was seemingly over. Hollywood deemed him box office poison, and he was basically impossible to get insured, and it seemed like work would completely dry up for good. But just like that, the actor had a revelation. In 2003, he had a strange premonition that something bad was going to happen to him after eating a burger from Burger King. He drove to the coast, got out of his car, threw his drugs out into the sea, and vowed that his new life would start here. And that's exactly what happened. As strange as it may have been, this premonition was the catalyst to get his life back on track, and it is a moment he even references in Iron Man. From then on, Downey slowly and surely worked his way back up the ladder. Despite being deemed box office poison, there were still some who vouched for him, and despite all his misdemeanors, audiences were quick to give the actor a second chance. He began working on a number of movies, such as Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Good Night and Good Luck, and Zodiac, all of which garnered a great deal of acclaim. He started dating film producer Susan Levin, and after convincing her that he had given up drugs once and for all, the two married, and Levin became his rock of stability. Although his demons were by no means abolished, he learned quickly to control them by practicing martial arts, yoga, meditation, tennis, Pilates, and going teetotal.
Well, I need to be kept right-sized because I can easily fall into self-seeking and depression and self-pity and judgment and all that stuff. It's kind of it's a bit of a default, but I spend enough energy and I've had enough help.
With hard work and a strong mindset, Downey Jr. had worked his way back from the brink, and despite being blemished by his past, his career was back on the upward trajectory.
Situations will resolve themselves if you are persistent and if you don't give up entirely. And that's what I never did. I never gave up.
That's why in 2008, 15 years after his last screen test, he submitted an audition to play a new character, Iron Man. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. First, we need to go back and look at his future co-star, Chris Evans. The future Captain America, Chris Evans, was born in 1981 in Boston, Massachusetts. Evans initially wanted to be an animator for Disney movies, but quickly gained a taste for acting along with his brother, Scott. Evans got his first acting credit in the 1997 short educational film Biodiversity, Wild About Life.
I don't know, guys. Manatees are cool and all, but I just think we should start off with an animal like these guys. All right.
Before eventually making the move to LA with a passion to get to the top, a hunger to succeed, and to be regarded as a renowned actor. He got his first major acting job on the short-lived show Opposite Sex, but it wasn't until 2001 that Evans got his first movie role, starring in the critically panned cult comedy Not Another Teen Movie. While Robert Downey Jr.'s career had steeply risen, Evans was struggling to get off the ground, and the next few movies he worked on were both critical and commercial failures, with some movies like Orphan King not even getting a cinematic release. It was a cruel reality check for Evans. He quickly learned that just because he was getting a role in a movie, his ticket to fame wasn't guaranteed, and he was quickly getting a string of bad movies under his belt, all of which started to knock at his confidence. But Evans continued on as a scrappy underdog, continuing to persevere and search for that breakout role. His career started to gain some traction after he was cast as the lead in the thriller movie Cellular, and his stock finally started to rise, and although the movie didn't make a ton of money at the box office, his charisma was starting to shine through. But Evans still knew that getting a leading role in a movie isn't a guarantee that your career will be a success. However, shortly after his role in Cellular, he got his first taste of stardom and comic book movies when he was cast as Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch, in 2005's Fantastic Four. While the first live-action Fantastic Four movie wasn't exactly a critical success, it was very much a commercial one, with the movie raking in over $154 million at the US box office alone. Now Evans was starting to become a household name, and although he was still far from superstar status like he is now, work was starting to come a little easier for him. In 2007, Evans landed a role in Danny Boyle's Sunshine, in what Evans sees as one of his proudest achievements. But although this movie was a critical success, it was a commercial failure, making less than $4 million at the box office, joining an unfortunately long list of sci-fi flops. To add to Evans' bad luck, the Fantastic Four sequel, Rise of the Silver Surfer, was also greeted with negative reviews and also performed poorly at the box office, basically killing the series off for good. In hindsight, this was probably a good thing for Evans though, with him growing weary of the franchise and dreading the thought of making a third movie.
I have no idea where I am in time and space. It could be 7 in the morning, it could be noon, it could be April, it could be September. It'll be nice to relax a little bit after this.
But now Evans had been somewhat typecast, and his desire to be a renowned and versatile actor and a new dream to direct wasn't bearing fruit. But despite this, his career was still going steady, and he would go on to work on a number of comic book roles, performing in movies such as Push, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and The Losers. But like Robert Downey Jr., Evans was also struggling with his own personal demons behind the scenes. Evans was battling against major anxiety, with his issues rising to the surface in 2007. Despite initially having that burning desire to succeed, he was quickly learning that being famous wasn't all it was cracked up to be, and he was struggling with the repercussions of being in the limelight. While promoting the Fantastic Four sequel in Europe, Evans had a major anxiety attack, having a meltdown and walking off stage. Evans' anxiety attacks became more and more severe, and those around him started to notice how unhappy he was. In 2010, when Evans was making the movie Puncture, his anxiety attacks were at their peak. With his health degrading, Evans started second-guessing himself and was on the verge of quitting acting for good. But something else was also happening in 2010. Marvel were looking to cast the role of Captain America. Back in 2006, Marvel Studios were looking to launch their own cinematic universe, with Iron Man being the movie that would kickstart their venture. Director and actor Jon Favreau was brought in to work on the movie, so next on the list for Marvel was to find a star with enough charisma and box office draw to play the role of Tony Stark. Actors such as Tom Cruise, Nicolas Cage, Leonardo DiCaprio, Sam Rockwell, Rob Lowe, and even Hugh Jackman were considered for the role, but Favreau had one other name in mind: Robert Downey Jr. Favreau's reasoning for this was twofold. Firstly, he knew how naturally talented Downey Jr. was, and knew he would bring the energy and charm required. But while working on the script, he quickly saw many parallels between Downey and Tony Stark. The characters had similar traits and life paths, both good and bad. But when Favreau pitched Downey Jr. to the Marvel executives, he was shot down time and time again. With the stakes being so high for Iron Man to be successful and Downey Jr.'s troubled past, Marvel feared having their hopes and dreams rest on the actor's shoulders. But Favreau continued to fight for the actor and eventually convinced them to watch a screen test of RDJ as Tony Stark, and eventually they started to warm to the idea. News that the actor was under consideration leaked online, with some even suggesting it was Favreau who leaked it, and fans were quick to agree that RDJ was indeed perfect for the role. From there was no turning back, and Robert Downey Jr. was officially cast in the role of Iron Man. Everyone, including Favreau, knew this was a huge gamble and were just praying that it would pay off. But from there, everything else seemed to just fall in place, and behind the scenes, Downey's work rate and improvisation helped prove he was right for the role. But there were still no guarantees the movie would work with a mass audience, and there was still some trepidation over whether the movie would be a huge success or not.
We've shown scenes at Comic-Con, WonderCon, they all like it. I've shown friends, but this is a Marvel movie. We don't test these movies. I know that there's funny scenes, that there's scenes with a lot of heart. There's a lot of truth in it. I love the performances, I love the cast. I think the suit worked out really well. I think Ilum did a spectacular job. The score sounds good to me, and certainly the sound effects sound great. So I don't know.
As the movie was tested, it started to gain some positive reviews, and after a huge Super Bowl spot, the buzz around the movie started to rise. So when the movie was finally released, it quickly went to #1 at the box office, making over $98 million on its opening weekend. Just like that, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was born, and Robert Downey Jr.'s career was well and truly restored, with the actor garnering many plaudits and attention from all over the world. Moving forward to 2010, with the MCU now in motion with both Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk, Marvel now turned their attention to Captain America. But again, it wasn't a simple casting for Marvel. Top actors such as John Krasinski, Chris Pratt, Sebastian Stan, and Ryan Felipe were all considered, but none of them checked everything off of Marvel's list. This is when they turned their attention to Chris Evans. Evans had initially been dismissed due to the fact that he had previously played Johnny Storm, but Marvel saw all the qualities they were looking for in the actor. They saw a talented man who, despite his rising stardom, remained modest, hardworking, and humble, and despite his size, was always the scrappy little guy pulling himself up. But according to Marvel casting director Sarah Finn, there was one major quality that placed Evans up above the rest: a moral fiber that you couldn't fake, something you needed to possess. Everyone at Marvel quickly fell in love with the idea of Evans playing Cap, and finally, thinking they found their man, approached him for the role of Steve Rogers. But then they were offered a shocking blow. Evans didn't want the part. Despite being interested in the role, at the time Evans was at the peak of his anxiety, and he feared that starring in such a huge movie would shoot his stardom into orbit and not being able to live a life of anonymity. Also, he didn't want to commit to Marvel's 9-movie contract, as he was genuinely considering quitting acting and wanted to direct. So he turned them down. This is where Marvel decided to bring in their big guns: Robert Downey Jr. In a phone call to Evans, RDJ strongly suggested that he not back down from the offer, and if he were to take the part, it would offer him up all sorts of freedoms. It was this call, mixed with a conversation with his mother, that finally convinced him to accept the offer. From then on, the lives of Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. would forever be intertwined. Like Downey's demons, Evans' anxiety didn't go away, but working with a psychologist, he started to get it somewhat under wraps, and now he is extremely thankful he took the role. Like Iron Man, Captain America: The First Avenger was a massive success, making over $175 million domestically, and in 2012, Evans and RDJ would star side by side in the culmination of all these years of hard work and struggle: The Avengers. Outside of the MCU, RDJ has starred in the likes of Sherlock Holmes and Tropic Thunder, for which he received another Oscar nomination for showing not only was he no longer box office poison, but a box office draw. Evans also managed to achieve his goal of being a versatile and renowned actor, appearing in movies such as Snowpiercer and Knives Out, and even got to fulfill his directing dream with the movie Before We Go. But of course, it is the Avengers and the MCU that they will be best remembered for. Together, their characters have fought together, fought with each other, and, with the events of Endgame, probably left the franchise together. Their career paths were unconventional, but necessary for them to be the people they are today, and to play their parts of Tony and Steve so well. Their roads to the Avengers may have been very different, but now they are known for the road they traveled down together.